So, it's on you to pay back the debt, he said. Out of the blue, my husband dumped his debts on me and vanished. No matter how many times I tried to reach out to him, I couldn't get through. What should I do? I can't possibly pay off such a large amount. But there were people who rescued me when I was at my wit's end. Mom, we'll be okay. The one who said this was my daughter. My name is Karen Sullivan, 35 years old. I'm a working mother living with my husband, John. John and I met at a mixer, which we attended as fill-ins. I was nervous, but John took the initiative to strike up a conversation and we quickly became friendly, exchanging contact information. After that, we kept in touch, gradually growing closer. And we started dating. I couldn't believe that I ended up dating a guy I met at a mixer. When I first started dating him, I told my sister, Lisa, about John. Lisa laughed and said, "I can't believe you're dating a guy you met at a mixer. I thought you would date someone from your workplace since you're so quiet." I've never been the outgoing type, and even after I became old enough to drink, I didn't attend social drinking parties with coworkers or friends. I was surprised too, I replied. You were just there to make up the numbers, weren't you? She teased. Yes, I admitted. When I showed her a photo of John, she was pleasantly surprised, saying, "He's unexpectedly handsome." After that, we caught up on each other's lives for a bit before parting ways. Lisa is single with no boyfriend. She seems to prefer being alone because it's easier, and has absolutely no interest in getting married or having a boyfriend. Though I understood her perspective, my thoughts were consumed with envisioning a future with John. Just imagine, if our relationship continues to go well, we get married, and have a child, how happy would I be? On my way home after talking with Lisa, I found myself smiling unconsciously. A few years later, John and I were happily married. I remember how I burst into tears when he proposed. We rented a new apartment and started our life together. We had never lived together before, so being able to spend the entire day with John felt like a dream. Although we both worked full-time and our schedules were mismatched, we made time to eat together and sleep side by side. We made a conscious effort to spend as much time together as possible. We had the same days off, so we would either lounge around at home or go for drives. Every day was filled with joy. Then, a significant change came into our lives. We had a baby. I will never forget the moment our little girl was born. She was so tiny, fitting perfectly in my arms. So, this is what happiness feels like. Our family celebrated with us in full swing. We named our baby girl, who had blessed us with her arrival, Susie. Before Susie was born, I had quit my job and was putting my all into my role as a full-time housewife, juggling household chores and childcare. Even though he should have been tired from work, my husband, John, would take over the chores and the childcare. "I'll take care of Susie. You go ahead and rest," he would say. "All right, thank you," I'd respond. I was glad I had married John. But, years later, I would come to realize that my thinking had been a mistake. A few years after Susie was born, John suddenly quit his job. He explained to astound me why he had quit. Apparently, he had been feeling stressed due to not getting along with his new boss. But, that doesn't mean he shouldn't have consulted with me. Sure, if my husband is struggling, quitting is an option. But, we are a family now, barely managing our finances with John's income, so he could at least have discussed it with me a bit.
What on earth? You're quitting out of the blue? Did you find another job? I asked.
No need to worry. I've thought about it, he replied vaguely. His answer wasn't very reassuring. I had nothing but anxiety, but I had no choice but to trust John. Soon after, John found a new job. That was a relief. I could have gone out to work too, but Susie was still very young, so I wasn't keen on that idea. I wanted to watch Susie grow a little bit more. "How's the new job? Can you handle it?" I asked him. It's all right," he answered. "Did something happen at the company again? Like, you didn't get along with your boss or your colleagues?" "Relax, it's all good. Here, I'll take care of Susie. Go take a bath," he suggested. Really? All right, thank you. Something seemed off. But I thought it would be too persistent to keep asking, so I left Susie with him and went to take a bath. A few days later, John came home with a gloomy expression. I tried to ask him what had happened, but a familiar feeling came back to me. Yes, it was when John had suddenly quit his job. Had he quit again? I hoped that my hunch was wrong. But that hope was quickly shattered. I quit my job, he announced.
Why? I asked. I just couldn't get along with the people there. They kept bossing me around. Can you believe it, being ordered around by people years younger than me? I just can't stand it, he explained.
I see. Well, we can look for another job, right? I can help too, I offered. Suddenly, John's face turned scary. And he yelled at me.
What's with that look? You're not happy that I quit my job? You're living off my money, after all. How dare you talk down to me while you're just a housewife?
With that, he threw his bag onto the living room couch.
Hey! Shut up!
John ruffled his hair, took out a bottle of alcohol from the fridge, and guzzled it down as if to get rid of his irritation. I had never seen John like this before. At the same time, an indescribable fear came over me. I didn't mean to talk down to him at all, and I had offered to help. John seemed very frustrated, and after showering me with a slew of angry words, he plunked himself down on the couch. I was left wondering what had happened, just listening to John. Perhaps it started from that day, the rift between me and John. From then on, John started a cycle of quitting jobs, never staying for long. Unable to secure a stable income, we had to scrape by.
Hey, isn't it about time you settled down with a job? I said.
Initially, I refrained from nagging, considering John's feelings, but as things were getting out of hand, I couldn't help but speak up.
Enough with your nagging. If you want money, you can earn it. Don't rely on me too much, he retorted. But what about Susie? I questioned. I don't care, he responded.
By then, John seemed to have lost interest in Susie, treating her like a burden. He was so happy when Susie was born, but now he seemed like a completely different person. No matter how much I pleaded, John would not hold down a job. After much thought, I decided to leave Susie with my friend Lisa and start working myself.
I'm sorry for dumping this on you, I apologized.
It's totally fine. Susie and I will have fun together, Lisa reassured me. Thank you, I said. Susie was only just starting kindergarten, but I wasn't too worried. Not only because I was leaving her with Lisa, but also because Susie seemed mature for her age. She could read newspapers, and she could write stories using simple words. Her personality was also quiet and somewhat detached. At first, I was honestly anxious. Would she make friends in the future? Could she properly interact with others besides me? But I found that I didn't need to worry, it seemed like she had made friends. As a parent, I was very relieved. With all this in mind, I decided it would be okay for me to start working. Surprisingly, I found a job quite easily. Thus, I began working full-time. The salary was quite good. Even if John quit his job again, I could support the family. It was tough, but the colleagues were kind, and I was able to work joyfully each day. A few years after I started working, John finally began to work seriously. Maybe he found a stable workplace. Just knowing that gave me some peace of mind. At the same time, I felt John's mood gradually improving. It was as if he had returned to the John the first knew when we got married. Being full-time, he started caring for me, asking, "Are you okay? Aren't you tired?" His personality change was so drastic, it was puzzling. But with his work situation stabilizing, I thought perhaps he was feeling more at ease, and I felt a bit relieved. Susie was also growing healthily. Around this time, John became kind to Susie again, playing with her as a father should. Susie seemed to enjoy playing with John, which made me smile. But still, I was scared to quit my job. So, I continued to rely on Lisa.
How's Susie? Does Susie seem lonely? She's super happy, Lisa responded.
As long as Susie was happy, that was enough. I breathed a sigh of relief, thinking I needed to treat Lisa to dinner since I'd be depending on her from now on. A few years later, Susie, now in 3rd grade, seemed to be enjoying her everyday school life. Our family relationships seemed to be as good as they once were. It made me wonder what that period when John and I were clashing was all about. We were doing well as a family. Then, during a conversation with John, he made a suggestion. How about we get a new car? A car? Yeah, I mean the one we have is okay, but I think it's time for a change. You know, it's hard to keep up with the maintenance, and there's the annual inspection. Indeed, the car we were currently using was something we bought a few years back. Each time the car inspection rolled around, the number of problems seemed to increase, and the repair costs were a concern.
Yeah, it might be time. I knew you'd say that. Karen, I've already got some brochures. Already?
Thank you. I never knew he was so keen on getting a new car. With a little bit of confusion, I started going through the brochures with John.
Susie, come here. What kind of car do you want to ride in?
John called Susie, and we all ended up flipping through the car brochures together. But I never imagined that this very act of John's would be the beginning of a tragedy. A few months later, we finally decided on a car and had it delivered. It was a new car costing just over $20,000. The car loan was in my name. Normally, it would be in John's name, but his job history was unstable, and I was worried that he wouldn't pass the credit check. From now on, I decided to work even harder to repay the loan. John must be feeling the same way, I thought. Despite my assumptions, my thoughts turned out to be greatly mistaken. Unbelievably, John stopped coming home. He disappeared somewhere with the newly bought car. Could it be that John had been involved in some incident? I didn't know what to do. During my confusion, I got a phone call. It was from John.
Hello, John. Where are you now?
I was so worried that I raised my voice without realizing it.
Hey, don't raise your voice so much. But, you suddenly disappeared. And the car is gone too. I was worried whether you had run away or gotten involved in an incident.
I desperately explained how worried I was about John. However, John just laughed off my concerns and revealed a shocking truth.
Actually, I've fallen in love with another woman. I love her more than you. What? What do you mean? I mean exactly what I said. I've found someone I love more than you. I've hired a lawyer and started the divorce proceedings, so don't interfere with me anymore.
Divorce? That's too sudden.
Oh, and I have some debts. Take care of them for me, will you? Debts. How much? Maybe around $300,000? You're gonna take care of it, right?
With that, John abruptly hung up. Could this really be happening? All those smiles he had shown me up to this point, were they all lies? I felt drained as I pondered the thought.
Mom, are you okay?
Susie softly rubbed my back as I collapsed onto the floor.
Yes, I'm okay. Thank you.
Though I said I was okay, I was obviously far from fine. Would I have to carry a large debt from now on? $300,000 was an astronomical amount. Moreover, the car payments were still in my name. In a sudden realization, I began to search for my bank book. I looked everywhere I could think of, the shelves, cupboards, counters, and lockers, but it was nowhere to be found. My debit card were also missing. I opened the banking app on my smartphone. My balance had decreased. I had no recollection of withdrawing the money. John was the only one who came to mind. But I couldn't reach out to John no matter how hard I tried. It's no use. I was at a loss. But right now, I needed to focus on making money. There was no time for worrying. With that in mind, I concentrated on my work. I didn't say anything to Lisa as I didn't want to burden her with my worries. Of course, I didn't tell Susie either. A few weeks after John had fled, I blacked out at work. When I woke up, I was in the hospital.
Huh? Karen? Are you okay? Sis.
Susie was standing next to Lisa. Apparently, I had collapsed due to excessive stress. Now, I had to stay in the hospital for a few days for extensive tests.
Going to stay in the hospital? Once you're out, we need to talk about John. I know everything from Susie.
From Susie?
You mean you knew everything?
Yes.
I overheard your call with Dad.
I couldn't believe Susie had known all along. I was a bit depressed, thinking I'd get scolded by Lisa once I got out. The next day, the tests began. To my shock, they found cancer in my body. It wasn't advanced, and they said it would improve considerably with surgery, so I had the operation. After that, I was discharged, which was good, but I was not fit enough to work for a while. I had no savings, no income. On top of that, I had to pay for the surgery and hospitalization. That's when Lisa and Susie came to my aid. Susie had explained to Lisa in detail about my situation and what John had done. Hearing this, Lisa was furious. She decided to do whatever it took to find John and make him pay for the debts and damages. But I didn't know where John was. How are we supposed to know where John is? How are we supposed to claim anything? That's when Lisa made a suggestion. John had a car registered under Karen's name, didn't he? Since it's technically Karen's property, why don't you try to retrieve it first? Can I really do that? As I expressed my doubts, Lisa made a surprising comment. Actually, I found out where John works. Apparently, John worked at a company located in the same building as Lisa's. Although Lisa primarily works remotely, she occasionally sees him when she goes into the office. Well then, go to John's place immediately. I was ready to head to John's place immediately. I feared if we didn't act soon, he might disappear somewhere. However, Lisa stopped me.
It's reckless to go there without any plan. I have a good idea. Or rather, Susie and I do. Hey!
A plan? Lisa and Susie exchanged glances. I had no idea what they were thinking. As I watched them in a daze, Susie broke into a wide smile. Don't worry. We have a plan. What could they be plotting? Even when I tried to ask, they wouldn't tell me. However, a month later, I found out what Lisa and Susie had done. While I was at Lisa's house, a call came in from a certain individual. When I checked my phone, it was John. I ignored the first call, but he kept calling relentlessly. I wonder what he wanted. Tentatively answering the call, I heard John shouting in panic.
Hey, help me!
What are you talking about?
Just come. If things stay like this, I'll get arrested.
And with that, John blurted out his location and hung up. Lisa and Susie, who had heard the conversation, finally spilled the beans.
Actually, we reported the car as stolen. And it was Susie who came up with this plan. Brilliant, right?
Susie blushed shyly. I thanked Lisa and Susie, and headed to where John was. The location was a park relatively close to our house. John was surrounded by police officers. They were probably questioning him. We went to John's location. We then explained the situation to the police officers and asked them to leave. After that, John ushered us into his car to talk. Inside, there was a stern-looking woman with crossed legs sitting in the passenger seat. The woman kept glaring at us.
Man, I'm glad you guys came. But why did the cops show up at my place?
John seemed oblivious to what the police had told him, which made me sigh.
Well, because we reported the car as stolen. It's my property, after all.
What? John and I are already divorced. Right now, he was technically driving someone else's car. It was only natural that a stolen car report would be filed. I guess he never expected something like this to happen. As John was stunned, Susie hit him with another blow.
Hey, why did you leave us? Why did you borrow money and never pay it back? Why?
John heaved a sigh of exasperation. However, he did not initiate any conversation.
You planning on staying silent? Well, if you keep this up, I'm gonna call the cops. You do realize you've already committed a crime by using my name without my consent, right?
Hearing this, John began to talk hesitantly. The name of the woman he was cheating with is Linda. It seemed she had just joined the company where John is currently working. They became close at the welcome party and ended up in a romantic relationship. And apparently, about 3 months ago, he got her pregnant. Indeed, Linda's belly was showing.
So, that's why you abandoned us, I said. Abandoned is such a harsh word, he replied. But it's the truth, isn't it? I countered.
John looked taken aback as Lisa suddenly chimed in. Watching his reaction, Lisa pressed on with the conversation. Next, Lisa started lecturing John about his past behavior. How he dumped his debts onto others, his attitude towards the family, his habit of quitting jobs quickly, and his tendency to shout at the slightest provocation. Whether John was remorseful or not, he kept his head down in silence. Linda seemed to be getting increasingly irritated at John's silence. I tried to ask about the reason for the debt, but he wouldn't tell me anything. At that moment, Linda, losing patience, blurted out a shocking revelation.
This guy took out loans in his wife's name, and he bought me loads of designer stuff. He's really the best.
It seems he incurred a debt of about $300,000 just to lavish Linda with gifts. What on earth did he buy to rack up such a huge debt? From the looks of it, he must have bought multiple items worth tens of thousands each. I was utterly dumbfounded. But what intrigued me was why Linda had disclosed the reason for the debt. If she was in cahoots with John, revealing this information would only put them at a disadvantage. As I was contemplating this, Susie asked Linda a question.
Hey, your belly's pretty big. Is it a baby? When are you due?
Maybe in about 3 months?
Linda replied.
Due in 3 months, that clearly didn't add up. If she got pregnant 3 months ago, she'd still have a long way to go before giving birth. Lisa also seemed to have the same thought and started questioning Linda.
Are you sure the baby is John's? There's no way it's due in 3 months. Whose child is it?
Lisa was even more direct in her questioning than I had expected. I was shocked, but it seemed that Linda had decided to spill the beans here.
Exactly. The baby isn't John's. I was actually considering keeping it a secret, but I figured it might turn into trouble if I got further involved with him. So, I just told you all, Linda confessed.
Why did you tell us about the debt?
I asked. Yes. I guess I'm done with John, Linda said,
laughing crudely. Just being in this hellish scene made me sick. John looked at Linda, disbelief etched on his face.
What do you mean by that? John shouted. Well, it means exactly what it sounds like, Linda retorted.
The spat between John and Linda had turned the already hellish atmosphere even worse. However, Lisa broke the tension.
I'm calling the police, she said nonchalantly. What? Why? Linda exclaimed. Both of you aren't listening to what we're saying. And in case you've forgotten, using Karen's name to get into debt is a crime. And John, driving her car without permission is a crime too. As far as we're concerned, you and Karen are strangers now, Lisa explained.
With that, Lisa told me to call the police. John and Linda tried desperately to stop me, but I brushed them off and continued with the call. A few minutes later, the flashing lights of a police car could be seen. This was the way to make them pay for their sins. The debt and the car issues, they'd have to figure it out. I felt relieved. Afterward, both John and Linda were held accountable for their actions. Neither of them received probation nor were they sent to prison, but they were ordered to pay me damages, child support, and repay the debt. It seemed they were both quite put out by it all. They pleaded multiple times through their lawyer for a reduction, but in the end, the recording Susie had made in the car served as evidence, and no reduction was granted. I wondered why Susie had been recording. When I asked, she said she'd seen it on a TV show she'd watched with Lisa, and had decided to do the same. As I thought, Susie really was clever. At the same time, I wondered what Lisa had been showing her. Since then, Susie and I have been living with Lisa. Her house wasn't far away, so it wasn't an issue for Susie to commute to school. We got the car back safely, and John was dealing with the debt. If he hadn't done all these strange things, John wouldn't have ended up in this debt-filled hell. This situation would definitely not have gone smoothly if it hadn't been for Lisa and Susie. I continue to work every day to provide a happy life for both of us.